is how to use creativity apps to amplify student voice. I have just like a personal passion for teaching students to bring their creativity to everything that they do in class. And so I'm just really excited to be presenting about that today. And what I'm really going to be focusing on today, as well as how to authentically integrate some of these creativity apps into your curriculum. So even if you're not a technology teacher or computer science teacher, you can still find ways to teach kids about graphic design, web design, videography, podcasting, things like that. So we're going to start today just by talking a little bit about why creativity apps are a useful tool for amplifying student voice. I'm going to share some actual case studies from students that I've taught in the past, students from my class last year. And then we're going to look at two of my favorite programs, Adobe Spark and Soundtrap. And I'm going to give people the ability to vote essentially on what specific creativity app you'd like to learn about. And I'm going to be giving everybody full lesson plans to be able to implement those, show you some actual student examples of that work. And then we'll get a little bit of time to get into those programs and start tinkering around with them and create something. And then in the end, if there's any time, I'll take any questions. So our two big objectives today are to first understand how creativity apps create a more inclusive classroom. And the second is to just explore and learn how to use some of these different creativity apps. And like I said, integrate them authentically into your curriculum so you can use them with students. So just a little bit about myself. This is the slide I hate the most. I'm going to go through real quickly. Some of you might be familiar with my YouTube channel for the new edtech classroom. So I run a new YouTube channel and a blog, and essentially share different tips and ideas for how to integrate technology into your curriculum, which is just something that I'm really passionate about. You're going to get these slides. So if you want to check me out on Twitter, visit my YouTube or my website, definitely welcome you to visit. So let's talk about why you would want to bring creativity apps into your classroom. So first of all, and I'm going to give some examples of this in a moment, using creativity apps in essentially differentiated ways of having students show what they know just helps us widen the tent of what is considered academic. It's also a way for us to authentically implement universal design for learning strategies, and specifically to give students the opportunity to show what they know in differentiated ways. And then it also is a tool, or they are tools that can help us teach relevant 21st century skills. One of the 4 C's is creativity. These are skills that have been identified by educators and policymakers, business leaders, as skills that students will need in order to basically be prepared for the future of work. So we're also doing the hard work of preparing our students with teaching those relevant 21st century skills when we teach them how to use these programs. Creativity apps also just provide students with authentic, meaningful learning experiences. And that's really closely tied to this next one, which is just that they're engaging. They can help you facilitate a project-based learning curriculum. And I think in particular, when we're thinking about how we need to engage students in different ways when we're teaching remotely, or if we end up doing some form of blended learning, that giving students something that they feel like they can actually like really dig into, feel passionate about, is a great way to engage students when we don't have some of the tools that are more readily available to us when we're just doing in-person teaching, like relationship building and that in-person communication that we just don't have the same kind of access to. So I think now is a great time, if we're planning a online curriculum, to be bringing some of these programs into our curriculum. So I'm not going to go over this in great depth, but just want to, again, emphasize this point that creativity apps do help with this idea of making the class more inclusive. So there are really 3 components of inclusion: competence, that is a student feeling like they have the ability to control outcomes and experience mastery. So by providing students with different ways of showing what they know, we're able to expand that academic tent, allow students who might not normally feel success in a typical academic situation feel success if you're giving them a different opportunity to show what they know. They might also just recognize new strengths, skills, passions that they have that they didn't know that they had. Also, this element of autonomy and being able to choose when you bring some of these different programs into your curriculum, it allows you to just offer a much wider array of choices to students for how they would show their understanding. And then this idea of relatedness, which again is something that I think is really one of the significant challenges of remote teaching, right? Because people are doing work, learning in these little silos essentially. And a lot of these apps have built-in functionality where they can, where students can collaborate with each other. They can also share what they have created and then comment on what they've shared and things like that. And I'm going to show you some examples of what that would look like. And then I got something funky going on there. Just want to show this chart for universal design for learning when we're thinking about how we actually implement this idea of differentiating instruction. To me, one of the most powerful ways that we can be using technology is to actually do differentiation, do personalized learning in a real meaningful way. And one of the tenets of universal design for learning is that we need to be differentiating how students are showing what they know. And so in a traditional classroom, right, we're having students show what they know through tests and quizzes, essays, presentations, posters, class discussions. And I'm not saying throw that stuff out. That stuff still has a place in a classroom. But what I am making the argument for is that we should be building these other ways of showing content understanding into our curriculum. So those are things like digital comics, digital books, podcasts, photojournals, videography, blogging, graphics design, website design, digital drawings, and of course there's more. So just want to show really quickly a table. These are actual students that I taught last year. And these are just students who, for their own particular reasons, had some challenges engaging with a more traditional curriculum, but thrived when given the opportunity to engage with a creativity app. So the first student was an African-American male with an IEP, very shy student who wanted to do well, but definitely lacked confidence to share in class. So he was the kind of student who never spoke up in a whole group setting and also did not do work outside of class. A program that he really loved as a way to show what he understood was a program called Storyboard That, which is a digital comic creator. And that's actually a comic that he made on the side to show what he had learned about the plot diagram of a book that we had read. And the second student, Latinx male student has an IEP. He is autistic and just has difficulty with verbal expression, reading comprehension, does not ever share out in a whole group setting, and in general displays some low confidence. So what you see on the right is this incredible podcast that he published, an interview with his dad about their experience with shelter in place. So although he did not necessarily feel comfortable sharing his voice publicly in the class, he still had a way to share his voice publicly with the rest of the class by creating this podcast. And then the last one is a student, also another student with an IEP, just a student who had difficulty focusing in my class, pretty highly distracted, difficult to engage in an activity for a sustained period of time. Really dug into Adobe SparkPost, which is one of the programs I'm going to show you, to make these really cool graphic designs. And she designed videos and cool stuff like that. And that also just led to some other things that she ended up doing, like joining Girls Who Code after school, because she learned that she really liked to create and do things with technology. So we're going to break out into some groups right now and just thinking about this idea of widening the academic tent and providing students who might not typically be students that would participate in a more traditional way in your classes. So I want you to just think about that and have a quick discussion. So I think just for a few minutes about which students or who those students are in your classes that you think would benefit from these alternative ways of showing what they know. Looks like everybody's back, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started again. So I hope you now just have in mind some students that you think these programs could have a real tangible impact with. And so what I want to explore now is just looking at some actual student work so you can see some examples of these programs in their published form. And then I want you to think and keep in mind while I'm showing them which one seemed to be most interesting. I probably am not going to have time to go over all of them, but based on people's preference, we'll start to look a little bit deeper at some of these more specifically. The first program I'm going to focus on today is Adobe SparkPost. Adobe SparkPost is a really incredible program for creation. One of the things I really like about it too is that it's an Adobe product. And I say that just because it has a lot of functionality that's similar to some of their more professional products. And so it introduces students to some of those skills that would actually benefit them if they went out and say wanted to develop a career in doing things like graphic design, videography, stuff like that. And kids get really excited and they recognize, hey, that's a really professional program. So it's definitely one of my preferred programs. They have in Adobe SparkPost the ability to have students build graphic design projects, video projects, and web pages. And when you're doing these projects, you're building different types of skills. Visualizing learning is a key skill. Learning to persuade in different ways with these projects, communicating key ideas, synthesizing information, sequencing information, doing character analysis. I'm going to show you an example of what that would look like in a second, and also summarizing information. So even though these are non-traditional ways of showing understanding, they're still practicing very real and relevant academic skills. I'm going to show a few examples here of some published work. The first one is a screenshot. I had to take a screenshot because I had to be able to black out these names. This is actually taken from my class website where I publish work. And this was a Genius Hour study that my students did last February for Black History Month. So they had total freedom to choose a person that they were going to research. And then they created these graphic designs in Adobe SparkPost, and they wrote a descriptive paragraph about what they had learned about that person. And another example is a video project. This is actually one, it's a little demo one that I made for myself. This is not an actual student example because I couldn't get one without the student name on it. But these little video projects can be done without actually bringing in video. You can bring video into the background as well, but they're videos that can be made with just images in the background and text overlay that still look really cool and can communicate something that students learn. So in this case, my students were working on a important historical event that they were researching, again, for a Genius Hour that I was running, and then they made a video. So I'll just show you a quick example of what this might look like. There's music that you can't hear right now. So you can see that these videos don't actually require students to put a video behind it, but that could actually be a more advanced thing that you teach them because they can do that as well. And then I also had my students for the end of the year, this was actually during remote teaching, make a web page. And this was a web page that showcased everything that they had learned throughout the year. I'm not showing the title slide again because it has an actual student name on it. And so we're starting here with looking at what they chose to be the 3 most important achievements over the course of the entire year that we had studied from the time period of the beginning, essentially, of mankind through ancient Rome. So you can see that they have these really beautiful images, and then students are also synthesizing information, making a persuasive argument about what they believed the three most important achievements were. And then they also embedded some of these other creativity apps that they had done throughout the year. This is a comic that my students created to show what they learned about the changes from Paleolithic to Neolithic age and storyboard that. So this was like a combination, synthesize information, make a persuasive argument, and then also just showcase some of the work that students had done. So this is another example here of a video project that students did. So all this kind of stuff can be embedded into that web page as well. So pretty cool.
Sam, we had a question from the
Sure.
chat. One person asked, do you have grading rubrics that you use for these, or how do you go about grading them?
Yeah, I can share, I'm going to share some of my resources at the end that are on my website. I actually have some posted rubrics on my website that are there are some categories for academic skills. So if we're doing things like using evidence and explanation, there might be a rubric category for that. And then if I'm teaching a particular creativity skill or technology skill, then there might be a rubric line for that as well. So I can definitely show what that would look like at the end if you remind me. So those are 3 quick examples of published work with Adobe SparkPost. And then I also want to show here a final project that I did with my students at the end of the year. So this was actually something that the entire 6th grade did at my school, my old school. And what this is essentially, go to some here that don't have full names on them. So what students did is record a podcast, and the podcast that they recorded was either an interview or it was a monologue that they planned. And then and it was all about their experience with shelter in place. So it was relevant learning about something that they had been experiencing for themselves. They made a podcast episode. They gave me the file. I embedded it here. And then they also designed this graphic, and this was a graphic that they designed in Adobe SparkPost. So this was our end of year project for one of the classes that I taught, just to have students really reflect on how this experience of living through the coronavirus pandemic had impacted them. And we just felt like it was a really good opportunity to give students the ability to share their perspective and their voices about that experience. And we modeled this entire project off of KQED's how to write a perspective planner for the podcasts that they publish through their radio station. Okay, so at this point, given where we're at with time, what I'd like to do is have people vote really quickly on which of those is the most intriguing right now. So I'm going to give everybody a Slido code for you to go to, and you can vote as many times as you want. So if you really want to see all of them, you could do that. But I do want you to think about ideally which one is a priority just given time. And then what I'm going to show you is really quickly what's going on here? Show you the planning document that I use to set students up for this. And then I'll also show you a little bit about how to use these programs so that you can actually jump in and do a little bit of creation yourself. Okay, so if you go to slido.com and then enter the code is B252. And I'll start to see as people jump in, and then we'll vote on what we'd like to see right now. Okay, so I'll give everybody, looks like we got 20 votes. Podcasting slightly in the lead. Just a few more seconds if you want to get in there and vote. And even if I don't get to all of them, which I definitely won't have time to, I'm going to give you the full lesson plans in the form of a HyperDoc that I've used that are pretty straightforward, that have hyperlinks out to different resources and graphic organizers embedded, some tutorials and things like that, so that you can learn how to do that. Okay, we're on a tie here with graphics and podcasting. So I'm going to try to squeeze in both. Okay. Sorry, I'm muted. Okay, so I'm going to put this right now. This is actually in the resources section, but I'm also going to put this in the chat so that you can open it up yourself and take a look at this. So this is a document that I use to plan for this graphics design project. And you can see here that I kind of repeat this project for different months that commemorate groups of people. So I've done it for Women's History Month, Arab American Heritage Month, like you saw the examples for Black History Month as well. And we start all of the lessons with learning targets. I'm not gonna go through that part of it in super great depth, but it involves a engage section where students are getting hooked in and building on some prior understanding of the topic. Then we're doing some building of an academic skill. So in this case, having students practice paraphrasing and then integrating direct quotes when they go in and research about a topic. And then I've given them a menu board of different resources where they could go in order to learn more about the person that they are studying, and then a graphic organizer that they're going to fill in. And they're going to use this to extract some information that they would want to include in their graphic design, as well as a place for them to write their description of the person that they are studying so that they can publish that in whatever way you're going to publish that. That could be Google Sites, or if you want to do something that's a little bit lower key, it could also be something like Padlet. So if everybody wants to actually jump in themselves and check out Adobe SparkPost, as I'm showing this, if you're so inclined to jump in and start to build a graphic and play around with it, you can. So just something I want to point out here, actually, before I get started, I mentioned Adobe is like a professional creation program. I personally use Adobe myself. So if people have seen these little Pinterest cards or YouTube thumbnails, I design all of my own here in Adobe SparkPost. And so this is something that I show students as well, just to invest them and let them know, hey, this is a professional program that people actually use for graphic design. So up here on the top left, you'll see the different types of projects that students can create. Oh, and I'm sorry, I should back up and mention that Adobe is, if you log in right now without a academic account or without a paid account, it's just going to watermark whatever you create in the same way that a program like Canva would, if you've ever used Canva. And that's okay. Actually, it's not that big of a deal. But to get the full pro access, you actually don't have to pay. You just have to, there's a little bit of a process. You have to contact Adobe, and they give your administrator at your school or whoever your tech director is the ability to turn on Adobe access, essentially, and they just have to input student emails, and then students can log in with their school email and have full access to the account. So that's what I did here. And I can actually, if people are interested at the end too, I have a contact person at Adobe that I could put you in contact with if you wanted to try to get school access. So for the graphics, there are all kinds of different size graphics here. The ones that you saw were like a square graphic, like an Instagram post. And then when the students are inside of the studio, they'll have these different options of different templates that they could use if they wanted. You can also just basically like dump everything and start from scratch. So this is a very dynamic program. You can basically fully customize graphics in whatever way you would want. You can bring in photos. It has a photo search function for Unsplash and Pixabay. So I'm just going to say I'm going to do a graphic design for Barack Obama. So you can see there's some images here from Unsplash. So try this one. And then that will add that to the background. Sometimes takes a moment to load. Actually, that's pretty good. And then there are different things you can do. So you can filter the image in different ways if you wanted to. You can add text over the top. So I would be encouraging students to essentially consolidate what they had learned into something meaningful. So I've had students do things like even make a hashtag for their person. What would this person's hashtag be? Or go read about an important quote, or have 3 descriptive words about this person. And so, for example, I might say something like, I might build here 3 descriptive words. I might say like first period, Black period, president period, something like that. So something that's kind of punchy and communicates a message. And I'm pretty openly talking with students about that kind of stuff. Like, let's, do some analysis of effective graphics, things like that. You'll notice that it has these little alignment tools as well to help out students with those alignment on the page. A really cool element of Adobe SparkPost is this style tool. I've heard people say that basically this style tool essentially renders a degree in graphic design moot because it sort of does that for people and you no longer need a graphic designer. So you'll see here just basically suggests different types of designs that students can use, and it just makes it more creative, customizable, things like that. And it's pretty much endless, the types of stuff that they can do on there. So once students get this, or once they finish, and I would give them a decent amount of time to tinker around in it. As I mentioned, I teach middle school, and they definitely need direct instruction about aesthetics. So they need direct instruction to understand that, this doesn't belong just like there or something like that, or that there should be some intentionality about where you're putting text and images to really communicate a message. So that's definitely something that you should take into consideration when you're teaching students graphic design, because it's more of a visual medium, not very text heavy. When they're done, they would go up to share, and then they can get a shareable link to publish the podcast there. Okay, so I know I kind of rushed the end there, but I do want to show the podcasting project because it's awesome. And I definitely recommend that you try it with students, especially if you end up doing something, again, for remote teaching. So I've included this HyperDoc in the resources, and this is basically walking through all the different steps of what it would take to make a podcast with students. So you're going to start, again, with an engage activity where students are going to be reflecting on what they already know about podcasting. And then it just takes them out to different links where they're going to explore podcasts, learn about different elements of a podcast, reflect upon those. And you can do that in different ways, whether that's live instruction and then you're live discussing that, or having students discuss in a collaborative environment like Padlet what they've learned about podcasting. I put some of these sentence starters in here as well. And then typically, I actually used to run a podcasting club, and typically I would actually allow students to come up with their own focus question. In this case, I did direct them to make a podcast about their experience with shelter in place because it just was a particularly pertinent historical moment, but you don't have to do that. And the tools are in here as well to help students with thinking about how they would build their own topic. And then I have a sample. This is an actual little monologue that I recorded, sample podcast that I composed. And I composed this based on this guide to writing a perspective. So perspectives are those really short podcast episodes that are published in KQED that are intended to essentially communicate a bigger message. So I'm really emphasizing with students when we're writing these that they're going to do a really close-up descriptive section where they're really painting a picture, and that's going to be the meat of their podcast. And then at the end, they're really pulling back and they're making a bigger picture argument about something about the state of the world, or in this case, shelter in place. And then also teach them how to do things like record high quality audio. Soundtrap is a phone app, so some students are recording it on a phone. So I show them how to do that. This is a friend of mine, Top Gibson, has this cool video about how to get the best recording on your phone by like going into your closet or your car. So it's pretty funny. And then just different links to how to use Soundtrap so that students can build that Soundtrap or build that podcast. With podcasting, it's actually a little bit less about the tech. It's more about all the planning that leads up to it. It's much more planning and preparation heavy. The recording doesn't actually take that much time. It's pretty much just plug and play. And then there is some post-recording editing and work that they can do with building some of the elements that would go along with podcasts, like a title and a description, and they can build a musical interlude, things like that. And then I have them make this Adobe Spark graphic that accompanies the podcast that you saw in this example as well. So I'm going to show you really quickly the Soundtrap Studio so you can get a sense of how it works. Soundtrap, it was free during school closures at the end of the year. I don't know if that's still being extended. So it's something to look at. Of course, you could always, as with every program, do a trial period and check it out and see if you like it. So when students get in, they go here to podcast, and there are a couple things that you need to set up. And I have some other tutorials, full tutorials about this if you're interested in, but in learning more about it. But basically what they're going to do is just go to add new tracks, voice and microphone. They're going to have that podcast that's ready to go. They're going to click start recording, and you'll see that bar moving up top. That is recording the podcast. It's not recording. Oh, maybe it is recording what I said. So it looks like it did. It's basically a layered system. So it's similar to GarageBand or different video editing programs and things like that. And it works in a similar way too, where you can essentially scrub the side of the track or move it around, things like that. And then students can do other things like build little interludes or introductions to their podcast by adding music and sounds and other types of voiceovers. So they can do that by going up here to the music icon. They can search for a sound. So when I was making one, for example, I did like a dog barking and I dragged that in. It's just not, my sound is not working because of my sound setup right here. So all this is fully draggable, editable. And then another really cool feature of Soundtrap is this transcribed voice track. So the way that transcribed voice tracks works is, I'm actually going to show you what it looks like in another example that's already done because it takes a little while to make, is that it uses artificial intelligence. And what it does is, let's see here. It will read the track that was recorded, and then it will transcribe that track. So when it transcribes it here, it's going to pull up a text version of that. And that will actually allow you in the transcription to edit the audio directly. So rather than, like, students don't need to actually go up here and fiddle with the layer up here, they can use the voice track transcription to edit the audio directly. So let's see if it's going to pop up.
Sam, I had a quick question.
Sure.
It's actually from our chat. Someone asked, Can students can students collaborate in distance learning with Soundtrap?
They can. So up here where it says collaborators, with the add button here, you can actually see that some other people have been invited. So this does, I had students actually do this where they had a virtual interview with another student. So they can add by going here. I'm not going to press that because I think it's probably going to pull up my class list. But you can interview other people. It does have a walled garden, which is essentially a privacy function. So there are some limits to who they can collaborate with. It's actually relatively restricted. So if you have like a Google Classroom, you can upload all your students in Google Classroom, and then they would be in the list of people that students could invite and then have a conversation with. But it's not going, if you have the EDU account, it's not going to allow them to like phone some random person through the studio. But yes, you can definitely use it for collaboration, and lots of my students did that.
We had another question too in the chat about can you do anything like podcasting in specific subjects like math and science with this, or
100%. Yeah. So actually, if you, just one thing I do want to show here is just that example, since it's pulled up, and then I'll show some math science type lesson plans that are actually on the Soundtrap website. Let's say, for example, for whatever reason that I wanted to delete this part here where it says a member of your family. What I can do is highlight it, right click it, and then click cut audio. And notice up here that it cut that audio out. So again, students don't have to actually deal with managing the bar. They can just do all their editing directly in the transcription. So it's a really cool feature. So as far as other lesson plans go, on the Soundtrap website, under resources, oh, you know what? This is not my EDU account is the problem. It says EDU user. To get into my other account, hold on. So this is an EDU account. The other one says EDU, but it doesn't have all the EDU features for whatever reason. They have lesson plans in here. So they have a blog with Soundtrap, and then all these different ideas for what you can do with some different subjects. So they have subject specific lesson plans that you can check out. So there are definitely lots of different ways that you can bring podcasting into different subjects for sure. Okay, so the bummer part of this and the time that I have is what I love to do with people is actually build something. And obviously we don't have time to do that, but I am glad that I was able to at least show a lot of these different programs. So I'm gonna go, I got all kinds of tab management here, hold on. So do we have time still for another breakout group? I know it's 7:51.
We have about 9 minutes until wrap up with closing and everything.
Okay. Maybe people, rather than the breakout, could drop an idea in the chat. I had a Padlet set up for us, which we could use actually if people, do you think we have time to do that?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So I was going to have some people create something and then actually post it. I don't think we're going to obviously have time to do that. So instead, you know what? This is always tech issues. Let's just post in the chat, just any thought you have after seeing those. So seeing a graphic design project, even seeing the examples, even if you didn't get the full picture of the video or the web page or the podcast, about how you might bring that in and use that with students. So I think just for time, let's just drop that in the chat if that works.
Okay. I'll go ahead and share one that I'm reading from the chat.
Awesome.
Distance learning readers theater would be so much fun with Soundtrap. What a great idea, Felicia.
Cool. And people could even just unmute themselves and jump in if you want to share.
Our librarian likes to get involved with the kids, and I think it could be fun for her to have a way to connect with the students and do book recommendations for different age groups and from different grade levels. And they could collaborate and make one whole podcast, maybe put it out once or twice a month so that people had ideas of things to read, maybe that are available for free online if we're still distance learning, or what they could look for from the library if they're able to use Libby or something to check out from the local library.
I love that. And put with something like Padlet too, you could have like a permanent board and you can upload the audio file right in there. So that could be a place where students just go to listen to different book recommendations, or they could even choose different ways. If you had students involved, like different ways that they could show something that they learned or like about their favorite book, an audio or a short video or even a graphic.
We also just got a really good one from Lori Gross. In a reading club, a student could take the role of the character in the novel and do a podcast with the characters interviewing each other or a person from historical time, such as the Gold Rush. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I've seen some real there are some really cool lesson plans. There are some on Soundtrap as well where people pretend that they have students basically take on the perspective of a historical character and record a podcast from that person's perspective. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Jonathan also just mentioned one as well with kids could do a podcast of their loved ones or with family members or loved ones who they can't see because of shelter in place.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. Awesome. Absolutely. So as I mentioned in the beginning, this slide deck is going to go out to everybody, and I have included links to all those lesson plans that I showed. So if you want to do that video project lesson plan, for example, I actually didn't show that one yet. It looks similar to the graphic design, but it's different. If you're interested in that, you could pull this lesson plan. You could check that out. I also have the graphic organizer to the podcasting lesson plan and graphic design as well. And then the question about rubrics and things like that. So if you go to my website and you go to my blog, on my blog, I have, actually, I think it's in the digital books. So I have blog entries and videos about all kinds of other creativity apps as well. On this digital books one at the bottom, there is a rubric way down here. And you could basically take this right here. And I have a link to that as well. So you could grab that and see the rubric that I use for assessment. And then I have full tutorials for all this kind of stuff on my YouTube channel. So everything that I showed, I have a video for. I have a video for the podcasting projects. I have a couple podcasting videos, but I basically walk you through that whole process here of like couch to publication in a podcast, how to make the video report here, also how to do that Adobe Spark webpage. So I have all that stuff and a lot more about different types of creativity apps. And then just my last thing, I am launching an online course about integrating technology into your classroom to foster creativity and personalized learning and increase engagement. And so if that's something that you're interested in, I also have a link to the waitlist for that. And I'll include some information about that in the Google form survey as well.
You know, Sam, on behalf of myself and what I've been reading in the chat and SVQ, I just want to take this opportunity to really thank you for putting this together for us tonight. There's so many valuable resources in here, and I think it's going to be really helpful for all of us. So before we wrap up, I just really wanted to tell you that I really appreciate all this hard work that you put in, and it's really great stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great.